So welcome to my video on making a cornhole boards. I've got a few kids at Michigan State this year, and so we thought it'd be fun to go to and tailgate at Michigan State, visit with the boys, bring a cornhole game. But we went to go buy one at Dick's. They're actually pretty expensive. They're a couple $100, and so we thought, well, I've got the wood, I can just make my own. And so that's what I decided to do. In the making of these cornhole boards, I ran into a few issues that I kind of want to warn you about and things to look out for as you watch the video. First of all, don't be heavy-handed when you apply the stain. I applied it, and when the instructions say you can wait 8 hours before you apply the second coat, but when I did, with the varnish, it started to smear the stain a little bit. So I might have been heavy-handed, so I had to wait a couple of days before I applied the varnish on top of the board. Second, I used an oil-based varnish and an oil-based stain, and because it's outside, it's supposed to be better. I don't know if that was absolutely necessary. Cornhole boards aren't going to stay outside all year long or in the winter weather, so likely you could get away with an exterior water-based stain and water-based varnish. Third thing is I cut the legs longer than they needed to be to install them onto the board. Then I was going to cut them to length after I measured them on the board. But I used the Loctite on the nut and the bolt before doing this. So once I measured them, I couldn't take them off to cut them easily with my miter saw. So I had to cut them in place while they're installed. So it's kind of hard. So watch out for that. Lastly is do not get the board wet after you sand it. I sanded it with 220 grit. I wiped the fine dust off with a wet cloth. And I think getting it wet makes it stand up on its edge, so that that it made it rough again. So after you sand it, don't stain it. I mean, don't get it wet before you do anything else to it. Now, please enjoy the video, and I'll talk to you at the end. Thank you so much. I'm now cutting the support boards that are going to go under the cornhole top board. And so I'm making them 4 feet long for the length, and then they're going to be, the length of the shorter side will be 2 feet or 24 inches minus the width of the long length support board thickness, which are 3/4 of an inch. So when you subtract those two sides, the short length of the support board will be 22.5 inches in length. Here I am cutting, first of all, I'm cutting a straight edge on the edge of the plywood because right now it's not, it's a little roughed up, it's not exactly straight, so I'm just making sure I have a 90-degree angle edge that's clean at the edge of the plywood before I go ahead and cut it. Here I am changing the blades. I've unplugged the blade of my circular saw. The old blade that I had was just not giving me a good cut, not a clean cut. So I put in a better blade that's hopefully going to give me a better cut. So here I am measuring out the 24-inch width cornhole board top. Don't forget, when you're drawing the line, you're taking into account the width of the edge of the blade to the edge of the shoe of your circular saw, which is the flat plane or plate on the bottom of your circular saw. So when you're actually cutting it, you're cutting it right on the line of where you want it to cut to get the measurement you want. Also, please remember, as you saw, I was reaching underneath the plywood. I have a support 2x4 underneath there. You should be supporting the board right near where you're cutting so that it's not bending or bowing down or up or anything like that. So that's what I did there. What you see here now is I am now cutting the width of the support underneath the top board. I know I talked earlier that I cut it earlier and I didn't. This is, I only cut the 4-foot leg ones earlier. Now this is the 24 minus the width of the support boards themselves, so that when I hook it all up and kind of screw it all together, it comes out to be the correct length. And so remember, since there's obviously 2 cornhole boards, you have to double all the cuts you make and the pieces you make.
So I'm now using fairly large clamps to kind of clamp it all together so that it's sitting on top, or I guess underneath the cornhole board. I'm trying to make sure that it's nice and tight, flat. I've got 90 degree angles in the corners of the board, making sure that it just kind of all lines up, and it did. So I just double checking that I had the cuts right. So now I'm using the Craig to make the pocket holes in the support boards. And so for the long lengths or the longer edge, I'm doing 3 sets of 2 pocket holes. I would advise that, you know, the Craig is a great product. I will make a separate video on how to use it. If you don't know how to use a Craig, go look up a video. There's plenty of videos online to see how they work. They're great for making pocket holes, which are essentially hidden screws that help join edges of boards together. So this is now the shorter edge that I'm doing the pocket holes. And also, as a reminder, this is going to drill into the board of the cornhole, the top board. But I'm using this short edge to drill into the other longer edge of the support board. And so it's always important to remember that when you're doing these pocket holes, the board that you're drilling, making the hole into, should be the kind of the inside board. So if you look at all these boards together, there's 2 long ones, 2 short ones. The short ones are sitting inside the long ones. Because they're sitting inside the long ones, you put the pocket holes in the short one. So please be aware of that. Now that I've got all the pocket holes done, I'm just reclamping it, trying to get everything set straight as best as I can. Clamping it all, not only the support boards together, but also clamping the support to the cornhole board itself so it's all flush against the board and everything's flat. Here I am just drilling the pocket holes. Pretty easy once if you've done the holes right and you use the Craig properly. It's a pretty easy task to do. I'm now just flipping it around, doing the other side. You can see that the one edge on the far side now is kind of elevated. So I'm going to use a clamp to kind of clamp it down to make sure everything's flush. I know I'm drilling the middle pocket holes right now, but you're going to see me move the clamps over to theirs. There we go. I've eliminated the gap, and I'm now drilling in the screws into the pocket holes. Now I'm going to drill into this side of it, kind of from the short side in the pocket hole into the long side of the support board, just to make sure that there's adequate structural integrity for supporting the board. So this is where I need to do a cutout for the cornhole hole, cornhole board hole, and I don't have a compass. So I should have probably used a nail and a string and did a circle. I kind of used a drill bit, measured out 3 inches and did a whole circle, little bit by little bit by little bit, to make a circle. Then I drilled using the one drill bit that I had that gave me like a 1-inch hole, cut that into the center of it. Then I used the saw here to cut out a circular hole that kind of followed the line of the pencil drawing of the circle that I did. It was not perfect, but it's the best I could do. So here I am. I want to make a pattern with stain for the top of the board, so it's not just a plain old wood color. So I'm taping off sections so that when I stain it, the tape is, you know, making a pattern because it's preventing the stain from going on it. And so I've seen a couple of patterns online that kind of have an arrow or an angle to the center of the hole. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm taping off obviously where I don't want the stain to be. I'm also leaving a big area inside the bottom half of the cornhole board that's also going to be blank. And you can kind of see the pattern that I'm doing right now. I'm covering the top portion with stain, and then I'm covering the outside edge with stain. And I just chose a stain color. This is oil-based stain because it's going to be used outside. I'm going to use an oil-based varnish afterwards. It's going to provide some UV protection, and it's going to add longevity to the board. So because it's oil-based, you have to clear off. If you were to reuse the stuff, you need to use mineral oil to clear or clean the equipment. And here it is. Here is the final product. Before I put the varnish on, that is, and also before I put the legs onto the cornhole board. So now I'm cutting the legs of the cornhole board. I read online that the top of the board to the bottom of the ground should be, I think, 12 inches. So I think I cut 12 inches to start or something like that. Then I'm going to install them, kind of trim it down to the proper height. So I cut this larger than I needed to just to start. I left it rectangular so that when I lined it up underneath the board, I just made it flush with the edges. So then I drilled a hole all the way through, as you see right here. Because I didn't make it round, or it's rectangular at the end, it obviously can't rotate. If I were to put in a screw and a nut, it wouldn't rotate, but I just did that to get the hole aligned. Using the initial board with the hole, I grabbed the other leg and I went to the other table and I drilled a hole straight through both of them, so I knew that the hole was in the exact same place on both the legs. You can see right here I clamped them together and drilled with one existing hole through the other leg to create a hole in the second leg. Now I am cutting the top of the leg. Some people have made it round. I chose to just cut it in kind of a 3-cut chamfer to give it room to be able to rotate. You can see right there that it's not round, but you know what? It doesn't have to be round. This is nice, quick, and easy. So now I install it with the bolt, a washer, and a nut. And here I am using Loctite to lock the nut onto the screw, but that was a big mistake because I did this before I cut the end of the legs to the correct length. Now you can see here I'm measuring the correct length of the legs, and when I do measure it and mark it off, I have to now cut the legs in place. I should have waited to use the Loctite. I should have just did a hand tight, measured the legs, marked it, pulled them off the cornhole board, cut them easily, with my miter saw or circular saw, and then reinstalled them. But instead, as you can see here, I am having to support the board. I have like something underneath it to kind of support it, and then I'm using my reciprocating saw to go and cut it. I'm taking the part or the piece that I cut off right here and using that as the template to measure and mark off the other leg so that they're both exact and identical to each other, and then now I'm cutting it off right here using the original piece as the template. Now here's the varnish that I'm using. The stains have to wait 8 hours before you apply another coat. It was not dry enough. Maybe I put on the coat of stain too heavy. So this is a couple of days later. The varnish now is going on fantastic. It is not smudging like it was earlier when I tried to varnish it. This is to help give it protection from the sun. I'm hoping it makes the surface a little bit smoother. I kind of used a damp cloth earlier on to kind of get the dust off, but I think they kind of raised the grains of the board. So in order to smooth it out, I decided that I was going to sand it down. Of course, what that meant is that I sanded off the varnish and some of the stains. The stain faded. So lesson learned, either sand it down beforehand and then don't get it wet, or live with the rough surface. I also recommend putting on 3 or 4 coats of the varnish to make sure that it's fully covered. So here's now the final product. I've got 2 of them made. I'm really happy with it. I did this essentially except for the staining part in one night. I think I could get this done a lot quicker now that I've done it one time already. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you in a minute.
So I hope you enjoyed the video. It was fun doing. It only took me essentially one night to go build it, except for the staining and the varnish part, but otherwise just one night. Things I've looked into is I'm gonna maybe buy some wraps that I can buy online, get a Michigan State wrap to kind of wrap the board to really get into the school spirit. There's plenty of them available. I saw, I think, on Facebook and on eBay. So that's it, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.